The PR Council. Welcome to the 8th installment of this year's PR Genome Education Series, Hacking the Future of PR, led by Jesse Soleil. He's going to talk to you about how to take control of the customer journey. If you want to ask any questions at any time, and I encourage you to do so, you'll see there's a question box. Just type that in and we'll get to it at the appropriate time. But please do ask questions. Jesse has got all the answers. Trust me, he's got some good stuff for you today. A little bit about Jesse before I introduce him. Jesse Soleil leads Novelli's global digital group. It's called PNConnect. He's responsible for digital and social strategy, including content publishing and technology platforms, with specific expertise in designing integrated cross-platform experiences that drive engagement and, importantly, revenue, which is what he's going to talk a little bit about today. He brings a mix of strategic consulting, business building, marketing, and digital product development to Porter, and has a deep understanding of how to reach both B2B and B2C customers in creative and compelling ways. Prior to Porter Novelli, Jesse was CEO of Massiverse, a boutique media entertainment company, which he founded to create cross-platform entertainment. I'm pleased to introduce to you today Jesse Soleil. Jesse, welcome.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks everyone for coming, and hopefully I'll be able to share some entertaining, if not enlightening, content for you all. So let's jump right in. Hacking the future of PR. So not hacking it in a let's steal credit card numbers and run off with them. Hacking it in a way of really understanding existing systems and configuring them in new ways. I think that's the key here. Is I'm not really bringing entirely new tools, but hopefully reconfiguring them in ways that offer added value and maybe will help you create new opportunities with your own businesses. So I want to start just by acknowledging this, the system of PESO. You've all heard it. I know that was an intro to the talk. You know what it's supposed to do, and you've already probably understood how to organize content in this way. But I think the part of PESO that is newest is both newest and probably the least looked at from a human behavior standpoint is the area called shared. So I want to start by talking a little bit about shared, and this will all lead into and support kind of the premises later on. So I think from being in the industry for a few years now, understanding the evolution of shared media, we started from an area that I call broadcast or one-to-many communication, where we were able to pick a magazine or a newspaper or a television show and push out a message to a fixed audience. And we all know that social works very differently than that. It's not a broadcast model, it's a many-to-many model, it's a networked model. But really looking at it and visualizing it and understanding what that means from a behavioral standpoint, it means that a category like moms isn't someone that you can just get to with a message designed for moms. Really, it means that moms actually are broken down into smaller groups of affinities and groups of interest that have very specific needs and very specific conversational wants. And what I've got on the screen here, this representation of moms, is a breakout of a lot of different kinds of moms and the tribes of these moms. Each one of these dots is actually not an individual, it's a community of interest. And you'll see that a lot of the conversation stays within these groups. So when you start thinking about what a shared message represents and how messages are in fact shared, the movement of content and messaging back and forth between very, very small groups of people is actually really, really an important concept and a valuable concept. And if you look over at Samsung, you'll see groups of mobile developers and UX entrepreneurs. And if you were to dive into mobile developers, you would see smaller groups of Android developers and iPhone developers, and then smaller groups yet of Google platform developers and specific audio, operating systems. So I guess the premise here is when you're really thinking about what a shared media message is, it isn't just about putting something in social. It's about understanding the network dynamics of the way messages travel between groups and communities, and particularly affinity communities. I think at the end of the day, what's most powerful is when your best friend shares something with you, and the moment that happens, you're more engaged with it than if someone at a much higher level, an influencer, shared that with you, or at an even higher level, a brand, or an even higher level, an advertisement, if that's shared with you. So this is a really important part of why shared is actually much more than just something placed on social. The other thing that I really want to talk about here, and again, this is much more behavioral than anything else, is how people act when they're on networks and when they're communicating with each other in those affinities. And so you may have seen this before. This is from LinkedIn. They've been really generous in sharing their research. And if you've seen this before, you understand the difference in the mindset between personal social networking and professional social networking. But if you haven't, I think the real powerful part of this is when you're in a personal place, your head's in a different place, and you're there to socialize and entertain yourself and to share content, and that's with people that you really like, those people you call your friends, and that's a really powerful moment for you. Of course, when you're in a professional setting, you have a very different purpose, and that purpose many times is just to not only educate yourself, but to show your community your expertise and to be seen as valuable and to participate in conversations that add to your professional credibility. So it's a really important headspace that you're in from that perspective. So this is another lens of what happens when content is actually in front of you, and how receptive you are to it and what you would do with it from a behavioral standpoint. And so the point that I want to make with all this is that people visit social media for very different reasons, but one thing is actually true. Social audiences are transient. And I think the concept of trying to place something in front of someone that they're going to be able to respond to and that they're going to value is really, really hard, almost impossible, even with advertising. And this demonstrates, this is my own Facebook feed from a couple of days ago. And sure enough, I'm sure with you and yours, as you're going through your conversations with your friends and that thing that your buddy shared with you about that crazy Santa Ana police situation, and then your friend's son dressed like a superhero, and then suddenly Capital One pops up, Save More with an exceptional rate. And of course you ignore that because right after that is your friends got married and your other friend's sitting on vacation with his foot up somewhere. And those are the moments that actually matter to you. So the probability of actually getting into someone's thought stream at this level is pretty darn low. So it's not that I want to discount the channel altogether. I think it's actually still really valuable, but you really need to understand the behavior aspects of it before you start to craft plans to be there, and then understand what you really want people to do as a result of you being there. So that's a lot of what we're going to talk about. I think the other part of human behavior and the way brands and as communicators, sometimes we, when representing brands or points of view, we don't think about social like a relationship. We think about social like a broadcast channel, and we put out a message, and we hope that someone who's receptive will catch it and they'll do something as a result. And sometimes that's true, but more often than not, particularly today, it's not. I mean, content's commoditized. So what is the thing? What is the thing we can really think about? And the metaphor I like to use is it's like going into a bar and seeing someone attractive across the room. And if you're this guy and he walks into a bar, you can imagine him walking up to someone at the bar and sitting down next to him and immediately saying, "Hey, how's it going?" and pop his collar up. You know, I used to be a doctor, but now I'm a jet pilot, and I've got a really cool yacht. We should hang out. What do you say? And And honestly, that doesn't work. And it's kind of the way brands act. It's kind of narcissistic, right? They walk in, they start talking, they show something. Hey, hope you're interested in this, and then they don't actually engage you. So I think a real conversation where the outcome that you really hope would happen if you really want to go hang out with someone, it would be, how's it going? What's your name? Those are nice shoes. Where'd you get them? What do you do? I mean, suddenly that's a conversation. That's real engagement, and that could lead to what I think we all really want these programs to turn into. We want them to turn into positive outcomes for the people who hire us or the businesses that we run. And so when we think about those positive outcomes, that in my mind is a conversion, and from conversions we really understand what an advocate is, someone who's gone through this process and believes that I'm of value. So you may start to see some of where I'm going with this. It's a customer journey, and you've probably seen this and engaged with it, and it's been around for a long time. This is not magic, but it actually tells a story, and the story for me is how do we bring people who suddenly are aware of you through a behavioral process where they actually want to participate and engage, and as a result of that engagement, do something, whether that's buy or sign up or download or play, and then as a result of that, become an advocate. I really like that thing. I'm going to tell all my friends about it. So this natural flow of the way people behave, I think sometimes is, I won't say forgotten, but we many times have very much of a focus on the area we're hired or we're tasked to do. And many times in our industry, that's build awareness. So I think the thing I really want to get to first, and what I want to set up is, yes, when someone asks us what we want to happen as a result of the programs that we're implementing, or the strategy that we're designing, or the content we're creating, we think, yeah, well, of course, we really want to understand what it is the audience wants, and of course we really want to understand where they want it and where they're going to consume it. But sometimes we don't ask ourselves what we really want them to do as a result of seeing this. So many times what we want them to do is just, hey, like us, right? Or I want to get an impression, or, and I know now we're starting to see that those are commoditized measurements. But what we want them to do next, sometimes we forget about that, but what we want them to do next often is engage, right? Read something, spend some time with it, watch this video. But what we really want them to do is to feel better about our brand as a result of this, and consider us and enter this consideration set. But actually what we really want them to do is buy our product, right? Or sign up, or subscribe, or download that white paper because we want them to buy our product. So I think that's the part where I don't want to be a direct marketer, and I'm not saying that that there is no value in understanding, building awareness and creating brand value. But I think by disaggregating it and separating it from the intent of actually selling something or doing the thing that your business does downstream, that's the part. If you forget that that's the purpose, ultimately, of all the work we do, we actually lose the opportunity to design something with purpose in mind. And that doesn't always mean design something that directly leads to a sale. But what it does mean is you'll think about what content goes where and what the purpose of that content is, and then measure the value of that content based on whether or not it did the job it was supposed to do. And so to give you an example, building awareness, I like to use social to do it. It's really hard, as I said, but I think it's much more natural to put something out there in front of people who are having conversations and hope to, not just hope, but design programs that also use like paid media, the value of earned, the value, and understand how shared works and get them in front of the right people. We still absolutely believe in broadcast channels, one-to-many channels. Of course, your your media relations program is super powerful and super important. And the most powerful awareness programs are integrated. And we throw that word around often, but truly the ones that are most valued are the ones where someone sees it online or sees it in person because people are in different places at different times, or sees it in both places and understands the relationship of them. And one that's really underused, but I'm going to talk about more, is search. Because truly when somebody does discover something, our human curiosity is propels us to jump onto one of the most widely used knowledge platforms in the world, which is, of course, Google or Bing. So understanding that, I think understanding how people discover and how people find things and what you want them to do next is really important. What you want them to do next, I think, is engage. But when you think about, well, of course I want people to engage. I want them to watch the video I produce for them on YouTube, or I want them to watch what I put up on Facebook. Yes, you do, but no, you don't. Because if you think about the transient audience for a second, again, they may see that, and they may engage with it, and they may even think it's great, and great enough to make a comment or like it. But right after that, your buddy who just got married posted his wedding pictures, and guess where your head is? In a completely different space. So the hope is, if you're going to capture someone's attention for a moment, great. Let's at least try to build a hook in so that we can bring them to the next level, right? Pull them through into another place. And that place, in my mind, is a place where you can engage. That place generally, a place where you have your own content, a place where you can aggregate or collect your earned content, maybe a content hub, it may be a blog, it may be your website. But if you think about that for a second, if I can have someone discover me and then instead of find more of me or not find more of me in Facebook, I can find more about the things that I'm interested in another place where I control the conversation, it suddenly becomes a different value proposition. Of course, it makes it a lot easier to set up the next step, which is hand off to some conversion channel that you can measure, whether that's, yes, another website where, hey, I've just visited, that's one measure, or yes, I bought something, or yes, I've signed up with my email and now I can be tracked, or I want to participate in regular content updates. These are all ways to convert, obviously, but then the last bit of that, really being able to use that data and understand it to not just find advocacy, but to leverage it. And those channels, again, are, hey, I really like this, social. Hey, my CRM is something that I'm regularly engaging with, getting those emails and I'm clicking on them. Those become people that you can target for advocates. And you can do a lot of really cool programs with those people and not just social outreach. So I'm going to give you an example of why this is an important model. JNJ, most of you probably already know about them, an amazing company. They recently, in this case, created a bioethics panel for trial drugs. It really was a unique move and not something that anyone else has done in the same way. So, of course, as a result of this great idea, they got some wonderful earned media, and this is the New York Times posting. But if you look on Google for a second, which is that center, you can see, yes, Scientific American and Boston Globe and Pharmacist.com and MedCity News, CBS News. Like, what a wonderful group of earned media. I'm sure that that's amazing for whoever's got that for them. But now, if you look at their website for a second, so I went to Google and I typed in JNJ Bioethics, and yeah, these stories for bioethics panel, but bioethics brought me to the only link to the JNJ site on bioethics was this page about their strategic framework. So there was no connection between all this wonderful media that they acquired, and there was no ownership of it. They didn't convert any of that to belief for JNJ, and as a result of that, they lost an opportunity to take that content and be a stronger part of the conversation and be perceived as an owner of that conversation. Now, downstream, the next step could have been, hey, as a result of these bioethics conversations, maybe a new drug startup saw them and thought, wow, this is really somebody we want to do business with, and gave them a call. And that could be a conversion mechanism for them or a tool for them to at least get that consideration from them. But anyway, I think the point is, do I want to engage someone on the New York Times where they're going to read my article and then they're going to jump into some other New York Times article and suddenly again they'll be out of my thought stream? Or could I republish that same article on my own channel and have two places where it lives and also take some ownership and write some commentary around it? And suddenly, I mean, I didn't write this article myself. Kay Thomas wrote it, but I can take some credit for it. And so I'm starting to build this pull-through. And now this content gives me some wonderful fodder, not just for discovery on social or through search, but then the connective point to search in general. And that's the next point. I think often we forget, like, this is the tool, right? This is how everybody finds things. And so when I type in JNJ bioethics or I type in bioethics, what story do I want to come up first? Do I want J&J's story to come up first? Do I want negative commentary about bioethics in general to come up first? Well, if I'm investing in taking that content and I'm putting it in my own site, in my own hub, and I'm creating and curating that content, then I have a much higher likelihood of my site actually being the first to come up in the search. So this is what happens. It's organic, and Google's algorithms obviously work very uniquely and sometimes mystically. But the key to SEO today isn't like plugging your website with lots of keywords. The key to SEO and being the first in search and the first discovered is to have great content and have it connected to social and have rich media aggregated on the place where it works best and where it's most relevant, and that's what those search algorithms are looking for. And if that's your site, that's what's going to be propelled to the top. So there's another thing that actually happens here, another reason why this is a good idea, and it's called content decay. So content decay is when, basically, you may not know this, or you may, you post something on Twitter and it disappears in an hour and a half. So what that means is I can't find it. You may have tweeted something really cool and interesting, and I may have loved it, but it's gone, and I can't find it. I'm not going to be able to find it on search because Google doesn't index it. Same thing with Facebook. It's 7 hours. So you have posts and you have content. It's not captured by Google. So when I post something or I spend money to create content and I post it in social and I don't have somewhere for it to go and I don't have any connective tissue between it and a place where that content resides outside of social, I lose the opportunity to discover it later. And again, human behavior is, hey, that transient moment where I was on Facebook and I saw that thing from Capital One and, I forgot what it was, but it sounded kind of cool. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to do a Google search and what's going to come up next, right? Somebody's angry comment about how Capital One, did them wrong. So what are we protecting against here? Well, we're protecting against being able to find the right thing. And so when I think about that, I think about we start with engagement, right? We start with stories. We start with understanding the media placement we got. We start with understanding what the value of that is beyond just somebody reading it, and the value of that is somebody discovering it. So where do I want to put that content is almost as important as what content it is. And when you put them together and you say, I'm going to put that content in the right place, because when people engage, I'd much rather have them engage on an owned channel, because not only can I continue to tell my story, but I can also start to describe some value, and I can start to produce handoffs to different types of conversions that I'm not going to get from social. Suddenly, you change the way you look at how content is published. And so this isn't really, like I said, it isn't really a completely new concept, but it definitely is about taking ownership of what's being said about you or your brand. And so the last bullet here, curation of content. People talk about content aggregation. I hate the word aggregation because it implies the commoditization of content. I think our job is to find the best content and the most appropriate and to celebrate it. And in celebrating it, we can brand that we celebrated it. but we don't own the initial content. So that curation process, not only is it really great as a tool for us to be able to reduce the cost of publishing content because we can get it from lots of places and just say, hey, it's our opinion, but also it helps us continue to get a life cycle out of content that someone else already wrote. And in the case of the JNJ article for a second, that article can live on our website for a really, really long time and can continue to buy us the earned value that we wanted it to in the first place. It's going to do a much worse job of that living on the New York Times website alone. So that also then changes the way you may think about how you're going to build awareness, because then you start thinking about how will people discover this, and that in discovering it, you're creating content for discovery that leads to something. And so the challenge when I say shaped like a hook is if you're writing a piece of content in social that says, hey, like if you like Mickey, it's going to be very different, and the outcome is going to be different than if you like Mickey, check out this new article about Mickey. And so what behaviorally, how are you going to respond? Like, great, I got an impression, I got a like. Is that a value? Who knows? Who really cares? Oh, there's an article on Mickey that I might be interested in. If I actually care enough, I'll click on it, and then where do I end up? I end up somewhere where I can have a conversation and I can control that conversation more effectively. And I think this is where also paid media works really well. And I know sometimes we have an aversion to paid, but this is the way I consider it. There are moments in social where things actually happen, shockingly, that may have some organic value. And the second I can identify them, the inference I'm going to make is those are actually quite possibly of value to other people besides the ones who have seen it. So how am I going to make sure that that gets in front of exactly the right people to continue to get lift and has a chance, a snowball's chance in hell of actually going, and I hate the word viral too because it doesn't mean anything anymore, but actually getting some momentum. And so that's the second where I can say, hey, I've got a paid budget on my side. I can turn around and say, this content is performing really, really well. Let me put a couple bucks behind it and see if we can't set this on fire a little bit. And quite often, if we have that ability, I don't think that actually interferes with the quality of our work or our mandate. I think it actually really enhances it, and the ability to get that message in front of exactly the right person at the right time only makes us more powerful. It makes our work more powerful. So this part, I've had a little bit of, have had some conversations where the discussion is, well, our job is not to create conversion. We're not salespeople. We're not really selling. And I understand that, and I actually agree with you. But I also believe that what we do creates so much value, and now even more that we can measure that value, creates so much value that we can actually affect sales. And that's something that we've kind of inherently known to this point where, hey, if someone has a better brand halo and if they feel better about this and they understand our story and our corporate social responsibility message, that people who are receptive are actually going to respond and activate and do something as a result. And that something, if they really, really like it, well, that something should ultimately be buy that product or engage with that product. And so I guess to a certain degree, I don't want to completely disassociate ourselves with the idea of trying to drive some sort of business value. And I think, in fact, there are a lot of clients who go in and don't really understand what it is that they want to come out of it, but kind of inherently know that being able to sell a conversion point or at least talk about it will make them more valuable and make them look more business savvy. So I do also want to say emphatically that sales are not the only kind of conversion. Having someone download a white paper about your server network, seriously amazing conversion, because the more of those get out, of course, that's going to turn into potential sales down the road or add to the leads pool so that the sales force can follow up with those people. But it's still in my mind something that we actually want them to do, an action we want them to take. And because again, behaviorally, if I like you, I want to hang out with you. And if I really want to hang out with you, I really want to go do something with you. So let's not ignore that and drop the mic the moment somebody decides that they like us and walk away, because that's kind of silly. And then guess what? Somebody else will pick it up and get them immediately in the ecosystem we live in today. And last but certainly not least, and actually is possibly a subject for a lot more debate, is the idea of building advocacy. And I define different types of advocacy. You know, we talk about big I influence and hiring influencers and celebrities. And yes, that's valuable, and I don't want to discount it, but I also think that we rely on it way too much. And the system that we imagine when we're doing this is, hey, aren't those people, those influencers, just like little broadcast networks? And we forget that the networks are actually made up of people having conversations like you and I. And so in the middle of that conversation, something of value and something really important, that the values that those two people share, that's what's passed back and forth, not necessarily the value of an influencer. Because yes, an influencer can certainly get something in front of you, but the most powerful influence is the one that comes from somebody you know. And so that's the small I influence. And that's where, again, understanding share that we talked about at the beginning and what really happens and what content is really of value, so that small I influencers really can make the difference. Those are the people who change everything. Those are the people that create viral. Those are the people that buy the products. And the power of them, actually financially, shockingly, it doesn't have to be in the millions. It can be in the hundreds and still represent value. So I'm going to talk about that next. When we're describing success, really, it's not just about describing, hey, I've obviously got all my awareness KPIs or my engagement KPIs, and people are commenting. And someone told me the other day about McDonald's really being interested and valuing engagement numbers, and that locally on social, if an owner-operator in a certain area got a certain level of engagement, like 5% or some random measure, that was success. But my question was, okay, for the owner-operator that's engaging those folks in their region, does that translate into selling more hamburgers? Because if it doesn't, and I'm not going to argue that it's not valuable, but I will argue that there's an opportunity in that conversation to sell more hamburgers. There is. And it's okay, because people who want to have that conversation and are ready to buy a hamburger, you got to set them up and hopefully be able to take credit for it. So let's not ignore the trajectory that can happen next. And I think the other piece of this is, if we're thinking about this holistically, you think about this in terms of the funnel, you design your program differently. And I think if you're looking at engagement first, and you've got this great content, and you're using social to discover it, then you're going to create your social in a way that's like a breadcrumb rather than something that's completely separated. And the beauty of this model, for a second, is my content optimization comes from knowing what content I put over here in my awareness channel actually generated engagement. And now I'm looking at the relative value. And I can say the stuff that didn't generate engagement, don't do it anymore. Because what we really want to do as an outcome is engage. And this is why. We're going to be able to show you much more value and time spent in this model. So I'm going to go through two quick case studies just to represent this in case it's too conceptual. So this theme park company is a client of ours, and we own the Disney Parks blog, and the content that we produce there on a regular basis and the content calendar that we produce is the center of this kind of universe, of this piece of their program. We hand off that calendar to another agency who plans the social. But if you see here, this particular post, this Twitter post, Star Wars Weekend starts today at Disney Hollywood Studios, and this link actually brings you to the parks blog. This direct connection, I mean, it's obvious, and sometimes you don't do it, but most of the time you want to, especially if you're trying to build engagement. I don't want to build engagement in Twitter. I want to build engagement on my own channel. So the beauty of this is the design of the content in our blog allows us to not only bring up content that they may have missed before. Again, hey, last week we talked about this new thing. This week we're talking about Star Wars Weekend. Disney Vacations is the place where you plan it all. We don't ever say, go click on it and plan your vacation, but it's just part of the text. But if you do click on it, you end up on Disney Vacations. It becomes very real and very easy for you to move between these channels. Now, the beauty of this model and the simplicity of it is I can actually show exactly how much revenue was driven by people who have connected to the Disney Parks blog. And it's significant. I mean, really, the ROI is fantastic. And there are things that we've learned as a result of that. And the other part of this that's beautiful is we can see who converted, and we can invite them to special events and create even more advocacy. And by the way, of course, it's natural. People walk out and go, oh, I love Disney, I love these things, I want to share with my friends. But it's a really kind of macro look at how this can work. And then the KPIs are, of course, each one of the channel KPIs, including our conversion mechanisms, like who we're tracking and how much revenue we made. But it's also understanding what content led to more people clicking through. And so that relationship becomes another KPI, and it becomes a really valuable part of designing the program. Let me also add that down below in awareness, there's some earned media, and that earned media really adds to our Google search results. So all of this ends up helping us on the search side, where again, people are like, Star Wars Weekend, that was really cool, I saw that on Twitter. And then you log in to search, of course, and what comes up first is our blog because of the connections, rich media, social connections, and the earned media that we've generated from it. So we get high placement, #1, in fact, in Google as a result. Another less direct mechanism is an insurance company that we've worked with for a while, and I'll qualify this in saying the numbers that I'm going to share are representative. They are not actual, but it builds the case and hopefully describes why and how. So in this case, we have this content hub, and we've used social and advertising to build awareness, and of course this connection also helps us with our search. But there is no connection between this content and the home site where someone can ask for a quote. We actually designed this program to change consideration and we publish lifestyle content rather than insurance content. There is no link, so you can't. There's only one place where it links from this website, and that's in the About section that links to the homepage of the company. So, but our premise was, if we do this content, we actually are of value, and people start to consider us, that there's going to be some point where they're going to end up on our website because they consider us, and they're going to quote. And as a result of that quote, we're going to be able to take credit that says, hey, someone visited our content, and that content helped us move someone into the next part of the channel, even though there was no direct click-through. And we use this tool called Merkle to do it, which it's actually a really interesting tool. It places a little pixel in your browser so you can see how you move into the next stage. And of course, then we have the opportunity to build advocacy against that. And that advocacy can include video testimonials that the mothership decides that they want to produce based on the people who have had a good experience. But here's the model that actually worked really well, and I think demonstrates why small I influence can be really, really powerful, and that the numbers that we pursue on social and the gluttony that we approach them with, large numbers, 2 million, it has to be 1 million, I'm going to be successful if I have 1 million, there's no consequence to it. So the premise that we said was, okay, if someone comes into the website and they quote, what's the actual lifetime value of that customer? Well, if they pay $200 a month and the average is a 5-year lifespan for that insurance company, it's $12,000. So if we can bring in basically 12 conversions, they're worth $12,000 a piece. So in this case, let's say in 4 months I can drive 174 quotes. Well, and I can only track with Merkle, just so you know, people who open the browser and then people who end up on their site from the same browser on the same device. So I can't even say, hey, someone who saw the website on mobile then walked over to the browser or picked up the phone and called it in. So it's a fraction of it, of the platform conversion. But 174 quotes and $12,000 per lifetime value, that's a $2 million return. So small I influence got me potentially $2 million of return from the one place that I can track. So being able to say, hey, that's the one we can measure, suddenly builds a lot of value, a huge amount of value. And that's value that isn't just value to you and to your client. It's valuable to the company, to the CFO, to the CMO. Budgets expand, responsibilities increase, heroism is suggested. And so you think about that customer journey in a very different way. Suddenly, oh, conversion isn't the goal, again, but guess what? Understanding it helped me just build a case for showing how the value of this channel and these channels are going to work for you. So the way I'm starting to think about it now is, okay, you're all familiar with direct marketing, and yeah, let's place a bunch of ads, and they, if you click through, you end up on conversion, and that's a numbers game, and the conversion rates are incredibly low and getting lower every day. This is indirect marketing. And what happens, the content that we create and that we aggregate in this central area, that content is like a conditioning agent. The more people steep in reading and engaging and checking out and having fun with, and yes, sharing, the more time they spend with our content, the higher the likelihood that they're going to go to the next step. Content actually creates qualified customers. So that was the thing, my aha moment, where it was like, wow, you can actually see someone who spent 45 minutes on our website has a much higher probability of going to the next stage because we're of value to them. And this is just a really kind of brute force way of describing what we all kind of know, but now we can actually measure. So last but not least, I think the key to this is actually being able to measure, and I think for the first time in history we can really describe the impact of our work on the business and not just on a certain part of the funnel. And I think this will allow us to get bigger budgets. It'll allow us to play at different tables. I mean, I know it's happened for our agency and for me personally. We're taking the lead. We're making our clients the hero because someone, our lead client who may have led communications and probably felt like they got the short end of the stick is suddenly in a position where they can say, I'm delivering value, measurable value. I need bigger budgets to execute on the things that I know are right, because content is actually a really, really powerful tool for us, and win the argument internally about who owns social at the end of the day. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it, and I'm definitely open for questions and for discussion on any of these concepts.
Jesse, yeah, if anyone has any questions, please submit them, write them in. Really important stuff, and it's, the PR industry really has done well over in Cannes this week at the Festival of Creativity, and so much of that audience is CMOs and the marketers, and what these messages reinforce the importance. Because these are the kind of conversations I would imagine, Jesse, you and your firm have with CMOs who look at the business maybe a little bit differently than other communications or PR folks.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's funny because we've had some conversations with CMOs where we've been discounted. Oh, that PR stuff. Oh yeah, we definitely need a Twitter strategy, and sometimes we do events, and it's offensive because we're actually able to say, well, hang on a second, I understand what you're saying. I understand why you might think that, but let me take you through this, and let's start with why content. And it isn't because it's a buzzword. It's because that's what we do, and that's why we're at the table. And that the minds that we've been able to change have honestly been able to help us convert folks in the room from an RFP request, very specifically, can you help me build awareness around this thing, make people feel better, and I've got $4 to do it, to here's how you actually should do that, and have them respond with, I want that, and here's 25 instead. So we can move the needle, and there's proof in the pudding, and the funny thing is, since we haven't really measured before, there aren't a lot of benchmarks, which is kind of a blue sky opportunity for us to be able to say, hey, let's benchmark this at first, And I'll bet you any money, someone who is unqualified is going to perform poorly against my qualified content conditioned lead. Powerful.
That's very powerful. No, I love the message. I think this is when we need to beat that drum consistently from, from the audience. It's a good one. Disney and Merkel are a bit out of the universe in terms of budget. What works for a small pharmaceutical company?
So it's funny that you say that, because I think you would be shocked, despite the amount of revenue that is generated by these programs, the budgets have remained quite small, but bigger than, obviously things that you might get used to. So there are other methods, and there are smaller ways to implement exactly the same strategy, and there are tools that allow you to connect the dots more effectively. And I understand Merkel can be expensive, but this is my challenge, is sometimes our budgets are limited because people don't understand what it is that we're doing or what we're promising, or we're not building a business case for it. We're just suggesting what, again, we already know is a great idea. So building a business case for it can actually help unlock some of that revenue. And in the worst case scenario, it's let me prove it to you. Let me prove it. Give me 3 months and let me show you. And then, what goes along with that? Merkel, really flexible guys, could be persuaded to do a test program with you for 3 months, knowing that if we close the deal and we're able to show the value of it, that they'll get some business out of it. So I guess, I know that we're constrained by budgets regularly, but this is about changing people's minds and behaviors as much as our own.
Great, thank you. So Jesse, it reminds me, so you must be tweaking your campaigns all the time, looking at the results, conversion. How often are you sitting down with your clients looking at this stuff and saying, this works, this doesn't?
Every week. So we tweak them on a daily basis, and our analytics team sits right next to our content team, and we're able to see an insight, see something happen, turn around and say, respond to this, ignore that. I think the other piece of that that's really relevant is our ability to respond to crisis as a result of it. And what I didn't suggest is having all this content actually obfuscates reactive content needs when a crisis hits. So if the first thing that comes up in a crisis in social today is all the issues someone has with, like, a children's hospital, for example, if we had a great content program, the first thing that would come up would be the content. And then you could actually produce content that refuted or at least educated people around that crisis in your channel very, very quickly, and it would maintain the relevance of search results. So the things that we can do, actually, they're great defensive tools as much as they are offensive and revenue generating.
Your audio.
Anything else? Matt?
Jesse?
Yeah.
Hey, sorry, I just lost control.
Yeah. I'm losing control over here too. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, sorry. One last question. I have a young aspiring PR professional here in New York who's listening, and she wants to know that fine line between, in the funnel process, of being too pushy or just the right amount of engagement, and how do you train your people to walk that line and push in the right direction and not too hard?
Yeah, no, I think the key is we're not actually selling. We're producing content, or we're earning media that reflects the needs and the interests of the audience that we're targeting. And if we're truly of value, and that value can be of entertainment value, it can be educational value, it can be utility value. If we're truly of value, people will respond to it, and I think the authenticity of understanding you're trying to be of value to an audience isn't lost on that audience. So I think, you know, it isn't a marketing message as much as it's, hey guys, I've got some really valuable stuff, and you probably would like it. In fact, you're targeted, so maybe not, but hey, that's cool too. But if you do, come and check it out. And that is the tone, I think, of the program, and that isn't about communicating that tone. That's about the tone that you want to produce. Make things that people actually want, and people will go there.
Yeah, that's good, simple advice. I don't see any more questions, so at this point, I want to thank Jesse Soleil for a very enlightening session, really strong messages. I think as an industry, we need to embrace this attitude and this philosophy wholeheartedly and have these conversations with clients. I mean, it is our future depends on being able to understand and achieve these goals. So thank you, Jesse. Thanks everybody for tuning in today. Come back on July 8th. We're going to have a session called Trust Me, I'm Creative, talking about how to build the strategic value of the creative within your agency. And July 15th, don't miss this one. This is going to be great. How PR and marketing should work together. We have CMOs, we have media, brand journalists. It's going to be really, really powerful stuff on July 15th. And we have a whole calendar throughout the summer, prcouncil.net. For more on our upcoming events. So once again, thank you, Jesse and Novelli, and thanks everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks.